Hello Revolution students, and welcome back to another video on the Chinese Revolution, area of study 1. In this video we are going to look at the Second United Front. It was formally declared on the 22nd of September 1937 and ended in January 1941 when the Kuomintang attacked the CCP, or the New Fourth Army. So the Second United Front was an alliance between the Kuomintang and the CCP. Even though you can see there it was formally declared on the 22nd of September 1937, moves were made to form it, to create it about over almost a year earlier. In December 1936, during the Xi'an incident, Zhang Jieshi had travelled to Xi'an, which was not far from the Yunnan Soviet, in order to force his troops to attack the CCP at the Yunnan Soviet. They had not been doing this because they had been working together in order to defend China against the Japanese invaders. However, Zhang Jieshi wanted his troops to attack the CCP because he saw them as a greater threat. However, what happened was that his own troops actually captured him, and they forced him to make an agreement with the CCP to form a new united front, this Second United Front. He eventually agreed to do so, but he only formally declared it on the 22nd of September 1937, almost a year later, and only when forced to by the Japanese taking over Shanghai and then Nanjing and pushing him back to Chongqing. The benefits for the CCP. There were many, there were quite a few. So firstly, as a part of the Second United Front, Yunnan itself, the Soviet, was legitimised and was made free, in theory, from GMD attacks. So Zhang Jieshi promised not to attack the Yunnan Soviet while the Second United Front held up. And he held to that agreement until January 1941 when he did attack the CCP there. The Yunnan Soviet was also made an autonomous region of the Nationalist Republic, and the CCP troops who were stationed at Yunnan, the Red Army, they were now made a part of the Kuomintang forces, although they were still led by CCP generals such as Peng Duhui and Lin Biao, etc. And you can see that there. So the Red Army was made a legitimate army in the view of the Chinese people. It was redesignated the 8th Route Army of the Nationalist Armed Forces. And another CCP army, the New Fourth Army, was also approved by the GMD and operated out of Jiangxi. So the Jiangxi Soviet in the south, which was behind enemy lines. So the Japanese controlled or surrounded a lot of that area down there. As a consequence of the Second United Front, the CCP also became a legal political party with a national constituency. So they were now seen and recognised as a proper political party, not just some insurrectionary group, as a legal political party which had a key role to play within the political life of China post the Japanese occupation. And you can just see that there. So the CCP was recognised nationally as playing an important role in resisting the Japanese invaders. And this helped them to gain support from urban intellectuals who had been outraged by Zhang Jieshi's refusal to attack the Japanese. And we've spoken about this a number of times. His strategies, firstly, to concentrate on fighting the CCP rather than the Japanese. Remembering that key quote of his, the Japanese are a disease of the skin, the CCP are a disease of the heart, and also his defensive strategy of trading space for time. And then finally, the Second United Front was also a contributing factor, along with many of the policies that were conducted by the CCP at the Yunnan Soviet, in increasing CCP membership and the size of the Red Army. So we look at those stats there. So party members in 1937 equaled 40,000. By 1945, this had increased to around 1 million or over 1 million. These are just estimates, but and then Red Army soldiers in 1937, there were about 92,000, but by 1945 there were over 860,000. Okay, now let's just have a look at a couple of historical interpretations about the Second United Front. So the first one is from Philip Short, and he writes, Chiang's reluctance to cut a deal was understandable. Cut a deal for the Second United Front. For 10 years he had succeeded in keeping the communists in the wilderness, on the margins of Chinese political life. So what Philip Short is recognising there was that Jiang Jieshi did not want to have this Second United Front, but he was pretty much forced to do it. Now they were back on centre stage, a legal party with a national role. For Mao, the high road to power was open. As he, and I really like this last bit here, as he told a bemused Kakai Tanaka, Japan's Prime Minister, several decades later, it had been opened by the Japanese. So Mao Zedong was thanking the Japanese for invading China because it contributed to the defeat of the Kuomintang and the rise of the CCP. The second historical interpretation here I've taken from Morris Meisner. And he writes, at the same time, Mao, pressured by both Moscow and Zhang Shiliang, reluctantly began to seek to include Chiang Kai-shek in an anti-Japanese united front. So Meisner's going from the other angle and showing that is writing that Mao Zedong didn't want this united front either, and he was forced into it as well. Stalin, desperate to form anti-fascist united fronts to ward off a Japanese attack on the Soviet Union, insisted that only Chiang had sufficient prestige and power to make a Chinese united front effective. Stalin admired Chiang as a strong ruler, a powerful symbol of Chinese nationalism, and the Chinese politician most likely to effectively resist Japanese expansion. And perhaps Stalin was conscious of the fact that if Chiang lost his position of power within the Kuomintang, then the Kuomintang would split into a whole lot of rival factions, and a second, I suppose, warlord era would ensue, and that would have made it so much more easy for the Japanese to take over China. Anyway, there are our two historical interpretations for the Second United Front. I hope you have found this video useful for your study of the Chinese Revolution, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.